India, good evening. Let's tell you about the India story that the world is now talking about. We've been observing over the last few years how a certain ecosystem has gone out of its way to target Prime Minister Modi and his government. But in doing so, many have crossed the line and have maligned the country. Instead, the opposition predicted doomsday. Some even said India would go the Afghanistan way or the Sri Lanka way. But viewers, the reality is what we are showing you on our screens. India is not just doing well, it's exceeding expectations. India's GDP numbers for the financial year 22-23 beat all projections and stands at 7.2% as per the NSO, the National Statistical Office. This is higher than even the RBI's projection of 7% and comfortably above that of the IMF and the World Bank. In fact, the BJP tweeted an older video of former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan, who was in conversation with Rahul Gandhi. In that conversation, which will play out, Raghuram Rajan rules out the possibility of our GDP even crossing the 5% mark. Now, if you don't believe me, listen to this.
Of difficulties with the war and all that, but because growth is going to slow in the world more generally, people are raising interest rates. That brings down growth. India is also going to be hit. Indian interest rates have also gone up, but Indian exports have been slowing quite a bit. And India's inflation problem is more a commodity inflation problem, vegetable inflation problem, and that is also going to be negative for growth. So I think that we would be lucky if we do 5% next year.
But viewers, the ecosystem has consistently derided the nation and has resorted to fear-mongering. Just look at the examples. India facing similar crisis as Sri Lanka due to PM Modi. Idris Ali, TMC MLA, situation worse than Sri Lanka, and that is what will happen in India. Then there are others. He said Narendra Modi will have to resign and run away. Then you have a statement from the Congress party. Sluggish pace of GDP shows a shortage of investment. Story of nose-diving economy in Modi's Amrit Kal. Congress saying the survival real challenge for common man in Amrit Kal. These are not isolated comments. There have been series of such statements and comments, remarks made by opposition leaders. Sample some of these.
When the failure happens, they find almost every other reason to justify. This is one of such reasons they are trying to justify. We know the economy, country, Karnataka has contributed a larger extent to the economy of this country, and we are the second largest tax payers. GST, we are the second largest in the country. Rather than commenting on these things, I only appeal to the Prime Minister, give back our share, give back our GST share properly so that we'll use that money for the development.
But the BJP is not just confident of India's Vikas roadmap. The BJP and top ministers at that have said that on the basis of the development done by the Modi government, people of India will vote back the BJP come 2024.
The stable government that the people of India elected the second time over in 2019, giving Prime Minister Modi an absolute majority, has been a very important element of this success story. His decisive leadership and his sensitive personality have helped combine development with empathy for the poor. So which is why we say this has been 9 years of service, 9 years of a better future for the poor, the marginalized sections, the less privileged sections of society, and 9 years of good governance.
We've seen the GDP boost. We are also receiving global applause, but the certain ecosystem that we keep talking about is once again back to what it does best. Let's open this up. Sanju Verma, the national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Kailash Adhikari, MD Governance Now, political commentator, Nikhil Jain, political analyst, Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, senior economist will complete the panel, will be joining us shortly. But Sanju Verma, look, the world is talking about the India story. And here in India, not one or two, but several leaders of opposition ranks, they have a different story to tell.
You know, Pranesh, first and foremost, many congratulations to you on the India Economic Conclave, which I think is going fantabulously well. Speaking of data points, let me just say this, that the general consensus amongst international credit rating agencies was that India in financial year 2022-23 would not do more than 6.1 or 6.4% at best. Because don't forget that large parts of the world have been in recession for the last 3 to 6 months and some even beyond that. And for us to actually notch up a GDP growth of 7.2% in the financial year 2022-23 on the back of 9.1% that we did in the previous financial year. Remember that the previous financial year GDP numbers have also been raised from 8.7% to 9.1%. So imagine 9.1% last year, 7.2% this year. And, I was there with Dr. Krish Subramanian, who's in the IMF, an executive director, and he said that even the 7.2% number may be revised upwards going forward. So my limited point is this: despite two large black swan events, one the COVID pandemic, the worst pandemic in the last 102 years, and despite another black swan event, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, despite these two black swan events, India has been the fastest growing economy for 2 years in a row. And I also want to say one more thing, that GDP is just one of the parameters. You look at exports. Exports have grown by 14% to a record high of $770 billion, the highest ever in the last 75 years. I was just looking at some of the other data points before coming on your channel. The manufacturing PMI for the month of May 2023 has come in at 58.7, which is, a 15-month high. And the services PMI
No, as always, Sanju Verma armed with numbers and data. But Sanju Verma, let's, this is not as much about, obviously the debate is based on data. But let's try and break this down for our viewers, because this is a full-blown political fight raging. And Dr. Santosh Mehrotra is now with us, sir. Good evening. Thank you for your time. Thank you for speaking to Times Now. What do you make of this vicious political face-off, sir, which is raging between the BJP and the Congress? The BJP tweeting this video of Rahul Gandhi with Raghuram Rajan, in which he said things not very nice about India's growth, GDP numbers.
Every distinguished economist gets something wrong sometimes. Please remember that 15 years ago, Raghuram Rajan became the youngest chief economist of the International Monetary Fund. He's a well-established economist, and that is how the previous government had brought him in as chief economic advisor. And if this government had listened to Professor Rajan, there would have been no demonetization, which is perhaps the reason why he left. And if there had been no demonetization, the economy would not have been tumbling down from 2017 onwards, all the way before COVID. Let's also remember that our economy contracted by 6.6% in FY21, the first year of COVID, which is more than double the contraction of the world economy on one time. Why? Because of poor economic policy management and a badly planned national and state lockdown. Now, from a very low base, you are going to rebound.
Dr. Mehrotra, I'm sorry to say, sir, but the audio line with you is patchy, and we'll try and fix that glitch, but I think you're pressed for time also. But let me bring in Kailash Adhikari. Sanju Verma, I'll come back to you. Let me bring in the others very quickly. Kailash Adhikari, what do you make of this narrative against the India story?
I believe, Pranesh, that the opposition and some political leaders in the opposition are just trying to find a dark spot in a bigger, brighter spot in a gloomy world, which is India. In a gloomy world, India is the only bright spot. And people across the globe are saying that about the Indian economy. In this particular quarter, 6.1%, overall year 7.2%, front loading of the capital expenditure by the government and the states. Secondly, big infrastructure push by this particular government, leading to a surge in employment, has really pushed up the numbers. If you see the kind of interest that the foreign institutional investors are taking in the Indian markets, they are net buyers. On top of that, both the Nifty and the Sensex are at an all-time high. The entire investment sentiment into India is at an all-time high. And today only I heard a report and I saw that article in a publication of your group that when Apple opened their first 2 stores in Mumbai and New Delhi, they have recorded the best sales across any region that in the first few days. The Mumbai store clocked a revenue of 10 crores in the very first day and 20 to 25 crores since the time they have opened, and it was inaugurated by Tim Cook. So this tells you about the consumer optimism in the India story. And I don't understand why in a bright
if the consumer is optimistic, what is the problem of the ecosystem, the lobby or the opposition? Nikhil Jain has his hand up. Nikhil? Nikhil, can you hear me?
Can't hear the audio.
All right. Viewers, I apologize. There's some trouble. We had that with Dr. Mehrotra. Sanju Verma, you wanted to respond to the point about demo that Dr. Mehrotra made. Yes, ma'am.
I can hear it now.
Pranesh, this whole narrative about demonetization being a big failure is a whole lot of gibberish and hogwash, because let me tell you that prior to demonetization, the informal economy was 40% of GDP, and today the informal economy is less than 20% of GDP. Before demo, the tax base was 3.8 crore people who used to pay income taxes. Today, the income tax assessee base is more than 8.7 crores. Prior to demonetization, what was Digital India? I remember in October 2016, just 1 month before the demonetization happened in November 2016, the total number of UPI trades were only 92,000 trades worth 48 crore. And in the month of April 2023, you had 895 crore UPI transactions worth how much do you know? Worth 14 lakh crore in a single month, which is equal to 6.8% of India's GDP.
But then why is the opposition in denial? Nikhil Jain, is this anti-Modi prejudice that you have that is blinding you from seeing the India story? What is it?
It's no anti-Modi prejudice. It is a pro-facts prejudice that the opposition parties and especially the Congress has. My good friend Ms. Verma was pointing out how we had a 9.1% growth the previous year and 7.2% growth this year. I want to give an example that is probably more palatable to people. I'll take my own example. I weighed 67 kilos. Then I gain weight and I start weighing 80 kilos. And then I lose 5 kilos. Is that an achievement in losing those 5 kilos? You have to see that I gained that weight. Same way, the Indian economy during COVID, we were the only stable developing economy in the world that registered a decline in growth. Other countries, other economies were like a -1% or a +1%. India was about -10%. So you have to look at the base we were growing from. So far as her point about UPI transactions is concerned, I can't understand how can you conflate UPI transactions with the growth in the economy. Of course, there is a greater smartphone penetration, there is greater availability of mobile internet. And
forget the UPI transaction bit. What do you say about the GDP numbers? Just on that.
About the GDP numbers, has the government presented proper data, detailed data for external...
Where is the data? Sanju Verma, very quickly, then I'll have to take a break.
Okay. Pranesh, I just want to educate Nikhil Jain. Other economies like the US, the UK, Germany, France, if you look at the data post-COVID, I did not heckle you, please keep quiet. I did not heckle you. Every economy in the world during COVID contracted by 10, 20 and 30%, and I'll give you a small example. Absolute numbers are more realistic than just percentages. We used to add about 33 to 34 lakh crore every quarter prior to COVID. Post-COVID, we are actually adding between 38 to 40 lakh crore every quarter, which means every quarter there is a growth of between 18 to 19% over the pre-COVID era. And I want to tell Nikhil Jain, just in the last financial year, Germany grew by 1.9%, China by 2.9%, France by 2.6%, US by 2.1%, UK by 3.2%, but India grew by 9.1%. And now it is said that Germany will contract by 0.1%, UK will contract by 0.7%.
We'll have to continue this some other time, some other day, but we are out of time. Sanju Verma, Nikhil Jain, Kailash Adhikari, completely out of time this evening. I thank all of you for joining us on Times Now. Lots more lined up, viewers, as we hit prime time. Please stay with Times Now.